How does the social media algorithm operate as a gaze factory? Social media has become an indispensable part of modern society, evolving beyond mere communication tools to powerful mechanisms shaping social dynamics. However, social media has another much deeper function. It operates as a gaze factory. This metaphor attempts to explain how social media impacts both interpersonal interactions and individual psychology. In traditional beliefs, the gaze is defined as the power to harm a person or situation through jealousy, envy, or negative emotions. Yet, the gaze on social media is a much more complex and societal phenomenon. The social media algorithm constantly highlights attention grabbing content, spreading the effects of the gaze to the masses. The power of the gaze lies in this. By showing something that needs no explanation, it creates a sense of obligation in the observer to explain it. This, in a way, explains people's constant efforts to create a sense of obviousness on social media and influence others with it. When someone encounters content on social media, they are met with pure visuality, without the need for explanation, and this visuality induces a sense of mental reckoning. This is where the gaze comes into play. The gaze pulls the viewer out of passive observation and into a mental duel with the image they are seeing. For the individual who feels this obligation to explain, the gaze becomes internalized and autonomous. In other words, the effect of the gaze does not remain confined to the observer, but becomes ingrained within them. This leads to a constant feeling of needing to explain, both in content creation and consumption. Once an individual enters this cycle, they start wrestling with themselves, essentially engaging in a battle with their own superego on social media. This internal conflict drags the individual into continuous inner turmoil, both as a creator and consumer on social media. The effect of the gaze causes people to feel an obligation to explain the images or posts they encounter, which over time has a detrimental impact on their psychological balance. With the effects of the gaze so evident, why do people participate in this production of gazes? The answer to this question lies within the gaze itself. To postpone the obligation to explain, people strive to become the obvious thing that needs no explanation themselves. In other words, to escape the gaze, they must produce new gazes. This cycle is one of the fundamental paradoxes of existing on social media. While people try to avoid the gaze of others, they inevitably draw those gazes onto themselves by producing content. Every post becomes part of being subjected to someone else's gaze and generating new obligations to explain. Since the sense of obviousness is constructed through images, this abundance of gazes distorts the symbolic order. Social media operates through images, and the perceptions formed through these images become more abstract and complex over time. Images, symbols, and signs are rapidly consumed and replaced by new ones. As these images are in constant flux, people strive to keep up with the changes, finding themselves continually compelled to explain more and more. However, over time, these images stop being part of a symbolic order and merely create a sense of obviousness. It is no longer the symbols themselves that matter, but the meanings circulating around them that become important to individuals. In the end, the burden of explanation is reduced to a pure sense of lack of dignified stance, or slipperiness, detached from specific symbols. This process leads people to feel perpetually vulnerable and fragile on social media. What they are trying to explain no longer belongs to a coherent world of meaning, but has become abstract images. This causes individuals to feel like unstable or slippery beings, struggling to stand firm against the constant change of the social media flow. However, this feeling is not confined to their internal conflicts. It also creates a constant race of shaming and humiliating competition among individuals interacting on social media. Yet the only thing truly slipping is the flow on the screen. In this context, it's not the individuals who become slippery, but the continuously flowing content. The images, symbols, and signs sliding across the screen pull individuals along, and during this pull, people are perceived as becoming slippery themselves. But this sense of slipperiness is not a personal weakness or moral decay. It is merely a byproduct of how social media functions. Thus, even though people try to stand firm against this flow and display a dignified stance, they find themselves on constantly shifting ground. As the screen scrolls, you are considered to have slipped as well. The content flowing on social media involuntarily makes individuals a part of that flow, preventing them from maintaining a stable identity or stance. Each new post, each new image appears as an opportunity to redefine oneself, yet this process only makes it harder to cement a fixed identity. Faced with the endless social media flow, individuals must constantly move on slippery ground, damaging their standing in the eyes of society. In the end, individuals wanting to take a dignified stance against this sense of slipperiness get entangled in a race to shame one another. This race begins with the effort to create the most attention-grabbing images or content on social media. To present themselves as superior and more dignified in the eyes of others, individuals continuously produce new, attention-grabbing content. But these images often aim to embarrass or belittle others. Thus, a perpetual competition of shaming and humiliation emerges among social media users. In this race, you carefully select the ultimate symbols of slipperiness and present them in contrast to yourself. To avoid being perceived as slippery, people choose the most emblematic representations of slipperiness and use these images to portray themselves as dignified and solid. However, this effort often backfires. In the end, it's not you, but those images that dominate. All the images and personas one creates on social media eventually slip out of their control and gain an independent existence. Consequently, the individual is crushed under the weight of their own creations, and those images become the defining elements of their identity. Social media glorifies not the essence of the individual, but the illusion constructed through images. For this reason, social media, functioning as a gaze factory, inevitably leads individuals into a battle with themselves.